Welcome to the Azure Bootcamp. This week we're discussing application modernization. Application modernization is the act of, or the processes thereof, of taking an existing application and leveraging the cloud to modernize the platform or its capabilities. There's several components that consist of application modernization. One is enhancing the cross-device experience. So, having the same code, the same systems work across mobile, tablet, desktop, browser devices, and leveraging things, especially in Azure, such as app services, logic apps, and some of the service fabric options that are there as well. Also, using data to make your app perform better. So providing more customer insights, capturing data based on other types of trends and metrics to kind of bring information to your users of the application. The cloud provides great data platforms to make this happen. Additionally, and probably most importantly from my perspective, is the ability to kind of implement continuous delivery and true application innovation. So using Azure specifically, there's integration with very many different continuous integration and continuous delivery platforms such as VSTS, Jenkins, Parler, to kind of make sure that your application is deployed to the cloud in a consistent manner. And additionally, a huge power of using the Azure and the cloud to modernize your applications, you're really future-proofing it. Instead of needing to upgrade your code, your frameworks, and other different components to use the most modern capabilities, you're now pushing that back onto the cloud. So when there's a new innovation that comes out with app services, so to say, you don't necessarily have to change your code. That automatically gets inherited because the cloud platform is being updated.
So what are we seeing when we have our customer engagements around application modernization? Probably the biggest benefit that our customers are seeing is that the applications that they wrote 20 or 30 years ago, they have an opportunity to modernize and make more efficient. Many times we've seen the fight between application developers and databases where the end result wasn't optimized to what they wanted, and now with the cloud they have an opportunity to create the application that they always wanted.
So what are some current challenges with application innovation? I mean, first off, and I think this applies across all technology and data centers, is the rising costs of keeping these things on premise. From hardware refreshes to the talent pool, from operations, it continues to go up, while the cloud kind of cost continues to go down. So there's one thing that gets addressed with application modernization. Another is when you're keeping these things in-house, and kind of back to the continuous delivery, application releases are infrequent or slow. It's more difficult to push out new features. Some releases are taking every quarter, every month, where if you use cloud-based platforms, you can really start releasing software on a daily basis if you want to. Some organizations even release every hour. This allows you to kind of fix issues quicker, to provide features as they're needed, and to really provide kind of a more contemporary application experience for your users. Additionally, what we're starting to see with a lot of our customers is there's countless hours kind of just maintaining these underlying systems, from patching operating systems to dealing with all the, zero-day vulnerabilities to, managing backups and recovery and scalability and working across data centers. The cloud takes care of this for you. In addition to that, because everything's on-premise and in these silos across the enterprise or across regions, we find out that a lot of data and information and systems are residing in silos. The cloud really abstracts kind of the physical location and the access to the system so you can provide a more ubiquitous experience across information, data, and applications.
So why are customers looking for application modernization? The two biggest reasons: mobility and intelligence. Certainly there is a lot of efficiency with the new applications that you can develop in Azure, but think about it. Customers and employees want to get their job done outside of the normal 9-to-5 environment. Employees aren't tied to their desk anymore. They have tablets and they have phones. And customers, well, they're very used to getting work done on the go on their phone. 20 years ago, 80% of all banking transactions occurred within the branch and mortar store. Today, less than 20% of customers go into a bank to actually do something. And on the intelligence side, there is so much data out there with these applications. When you move it into Azure, you have the ability to take advantage and mine that data for little nuggets of gold that you can use to find new sales, streamline operations, or improve business processes.
Some general strategies we see with application modernization. I love this slide, and we use it in a couple different concepts. But you can see here that everything sort of starts with these physical servers, right? You have kind of an on-premise application that's using your hardware, your systems in as they exist today. Kind of the first step that we see customers go to is sort of this hybrid cloud. And what that means is perhaps, keeping your databases on premise, but starting to move your APIs and applications into the cloud to access them back on premise. This kind of provides sort of the first step into the cloud. It's, a lot of reasons they can't move data yet, but they can move web front ends, APIs, and like that to the cloud that comes back. Once you have that, or whether you want to skip over the second step, there's kind of 4 different options you can go to when modernizing your application. First is to replace the software. So that's kind of traditionally what's happening with Microsoft Dynamics, SharePoint Online, and those types of things. You may have an application where you can just leverage a SaaS component to, capture data to provide workflows and those types of things. That should be your first option, because now you're not necessarily dependent upon developers to roll out new features. You're now using the platform and you can deliver features quicker. This is very constrained and only works within a certain set of use cases. The second is, and probably the most common, is to modernize your application. And that is to kind of either take your application and figure out how you can use PaaS components, such as logic apps, cloud apps, those types of things to make the most. Another one that's pretty popular is SQL on Azure. And that's actually, instead of having kind of a database installed on an operating system, you're using the power of SQL in the cloud to manage your databases. So you really get charged by data transaction units, DTUs, and you get a lot of the operational components such as threat analytics and backups and recovery and monitoring and those types of things. So very good option. And then the third, probably the easiest, but doesn't necessarily have the long-term benefit, is to migrate that application. So what does that mean? That's the common lift and shift. That's where you take your VM and you move it to the cloud. And this gives you a fine grain of control, but it doesn't necessarily give you the full power of the cloud because you're still dependent on maintaining that underlying VM and that operating system. But definitely the quickest route. And then the last option here is to kind of keep the status quo. And that's, keeping it within on-premise or within your data center using kind of the virtualization that you have, or retiring the application. You'd be surprised. Sometimes we go in and do assessments on these big data centers, or even small, and we'll find out at least 20% of the applications aren't used anymore. But oh yeah, by the way, they still have access to all the data and information. So we have these legacy apps sitting around that are exposing information where they shouldn't, that should be retired. Kind of going back to the very beginning, and the theme throughout this is talking about DevOps and why it's so important. We'll just touch on this really quick, but a key component of application modernization, think about DevOps. Thinking about shortening the time it takes to deploy software to your dev and test and production environment. Think about looking at kind of, more open source components and how you can integrate those from not only scanning and assessing your code, but adding more feature functionality. In addition to that, kind of think about, using VSTS or other types of DevOps platforms to get rid of some of the manual efforts that humans are doing right now that can be error prone or probably not the best use of everyone's time. DevOps automates those steps. Okay, in recap, lessons learned that we were able to capture out in the field is always look to kind of modernize your platform. So use those PaaS components. Lift and shift may be the quickest way there, but to realize real kind of return on investment over time, look at leveraging PaaS components. Integrate your DevOps tooling early. If you're not using VSTS now, look at using VSTS. If you're starting to explore, get that in place as quick as you can. That will help with your modernization effort. Leverage ARM templates and TerraGo. What does that mean? That means using automated processes to deploy your code in your application. Involve your developers in this. Make sure that developers are part of the planning, the implementation of the process, and also the operations on the tail end. There seems to be this system reliability engineer position that's coming out that's more contemporary. That is a software developer that's embedded on the operations team that makes sure the application is running good. Great role to have. And in addition to that, and we'll talk about this later, is governance. So make sure that you're using Azure or your cloud platform in a way that makes sense from a change control perspective, access rights, and availability of resources.